In the mountains of Puebla, Mexico, there is a church sealed shut since 1689, a place the locals avoid even mentioning by name. For more than 3 centuries, ecclesiastical authorities have kept its doors locked with blessed chains, and the families of the town teach their children to cross themselves whenever they pass by its cracked stone walls. But what few know is that between 1642 and 1689, exactly 47 saints were canonized in the Viceroyalty of New Spain, bodies discovered completely incorrupt, all of them found in remote churches where they emitted an impossible fragrance of white roses that lasted precisely 3 days and 3 nights. Chronicles describe corpses that retained the flexibility of life, with rosy cheeks and serene smiles that defied any natural explanation. What the viceregal authorities tried to hide forever was that behind each one of these so-called miracles stood a single family, a family who turned holiness into the most macabre business of the colonial era. Tonight, documents found in the Vatican's secret archives will reveal, for the first time, the truth about the Mendoza family, the creators of false saints. But before we dive into this chilling story, I have something incredible to announce. The first 2,000 brave souls who subscribe to this channel will automatically enter a giveaway for a fully paid trip to Paris to uncover the hidden secrets of Notre Dame, secrets no ordinary tourist has ever seen. Imagine exploring underground tunnels, secret archives, forbidden chambers that hide mysteries centuries old. All expenses covered, for the winner and a companion. All you have to do is subscribe and turn on notifications to participate. Now then, join me as we discover what lies behind the sealed doors of Puebla's church, where silence conceals a pact darker than any miracle. San Miguel de Allende, in 1642, was a thriving mining town where the echo of morning church bells mingled with the rhythmic pounding of hammers in the silver mines. Adobe houses clustered around the main church, their red-tiled roofs glowing under the colonial sun, while merchants readied their carts for the long journeys to Mexico City. The Mendoza family had arrived only 5 years earlier, establishing themselves on an estate at the edge of town. Don Sebastian Mendoza introduced himself as a dealer in sacred art. He was a tall, slender man with a perfectly trimmed beard and eyes that seemed to constantly weigh the value of everything they saw. His wife, Dona Esperanza, ran a prosperous embroidery business crafting liturgical ornaments, while their 3 sons specialized as artisans restoring saints and virgins. The Mendozas quickly won the respect of the local religious community. They donated generously to festivities, organized magnificent processions, and their workshop produced some of the most exquisite sacred sculptures in the region. When they spoke of their work, they did so with such devotion that even the most austere friars were moved. But there was something unsettling about the way they handled the bodies of the saints they restored. A familiarity with death that felt almost intimate, noticed by some, though never spoken aloud. Their workshop would remain closed for days at a time, and strange aromas seeped from within, a mixture of incense, unknown herbs, and something else no one could quite identify. In neighboring villages, rumors began to spread. People whispered that the Mendozas had inherited secret preservation techniques from ancient Aztec masters, who knew how to keep bodies intact. The family, however, always smiled at such comments, attributing their skill to divine blessings and knowledge passed down from Spain. On the night of October 15, 1642, the era of the miraculous saints began. It all started when Fray Antonio de Mendizábal, a Franciscan friar known for his extreme devotion and long fasts, disappeared during a solitary pilgrimage to the sanctuary of Chalma. For weeks, search parties combed the dusty roads, but no trace was found. The people of San Miguel held novenas, processions, and endless prayers for his safe return. Fray Antonio was beloved by all. He visited the sick regardless of the hour, shared his meager food with beggars, and had made the education of indigenous children his personal mission. Exactly 40 days after his disappearance, a muleteer transporting goods to Querétaro stopped at the small hermitage of Santa Rosa, seeking shelter from a torrential storm. When he lit his torch to illuminate the interior, he let out a scream that rose above the roar of wind and rain. There, kneeling before the altar with his hands clasped in perfect prayer, was the body of Fray Antonio. His Franciscan habit was spotless, his face radiated the serenity of deep prayer, and from his body emanated an overpowering fragrance of white roses that filled the entire hermitage. When the first witnesses arrived at dawn, they found that the body still possessed the suppleness of life. His joints moved as if untouched by death, his skin retained human warmth, and a beatific smile rested upon his lips. The Bishop of Puebla immediately declared it an evident miracle. The incorrupt body of Fray Antonio was carried with great pomp to the cathedral, where thousands of pilgrims soon gathered to venerate the new saint. The Mendozas were among the first to arrive. Don Sebastian eagerly offered his services to create a reliquary worthy of so extraordinary a prodigy. Yet something disturbed those who had known the friar intimately. Although his body seemed intact, it had lost exactly 7 pounds in weight. His once brilliant blue eyes now showed a dull gray hue, which some described as the gaze of one who had seen secrets not meant to be known. The canonization of Fray Antonio transformed San Miguel de Allende into a pilgrimage center. The streets filled with devotees from distant lands, bearing offerings of silver, gold, and promises of healing. Inns prospered, shops selling holy cards and medals flourished, and the Mendoza family became the most sought-after religious artisans in the entire viceroyalty. But what no one expected was that Fray Antonio's miracle would be only the first in a series. In the months that followed, more incorrupt saints began to appear in remote churches and hermitages across New Spain. First came Sister Catalina de Jesus, found perfectly preserved in the abandoned convent of Santa Clara in Tlaxcala. Then the hermit José de la Cruz was discovered in a sacred cave near Guanajuato, his body radiating the same impossible perfume of roses, his face frozen in the same serene smile. Each discovery followed a disturbing pattern. It was always someone known for extreme devotion. They always vanished during solitary journeys or pilgrimages. And they always reappeared precisely 40 days later in some remote sacred place. The bodies retained the pliancy of life, emitted the mysterious fragrance of roses that lingered for exactly 3 days, and displayed that same unsettling weight loss and the strange change in their eyes. The Mendoza family seemed to have an uncanny connection to these events. Don Sebastian was always the first to offer his services to craft relics, while his son specialized in ceremonially transporting the holy bodies. Their reputation as a blessed family grew so rapidly that even the viceroy himself sought their counsel on religious matters. But troubling rumors began to circulate among muleteers and merchants who traveled the roads. They spoke of having seen the Mendozas on strange routes at suspicious times, close to the dates of the disappearances. A tanner swore he had seen the Mendoza brothers hauling sealed barrels in directions that matched no known trade route. Maria Chicotencatl, an indigenous healer who inherited ancient secrets of body preservation, began whispering that the aromas from the Mendoza workshop did not match any sacred herb she knew. To her, it smelled of sweet death, a combination of substances her ancestors once used to preserve fallen warriors, but mixed with something else, something not of this world. When Maria tried to warn the local superior priest of her suspicions, she was found dead in her hut the very next day, apparently the victim of a heart attack. 40 days later, her body appeared in the church of San Juan Bautista, perfectly preserved, emanating the unmistakable fragrance of roses, her lips curved in a beatific smile, her eyes transformed into that same disturbing gray that now marked all the so-called miraculous saints. By 1655, 13 years after the first miracle, the number of incorrupt saints discovered in New Spain had reached an unprecedented 28. Rome itself began sending investigators to study the phenomenon, which had no parallel anywhere else in the Catholic world. The Jesuit Father Tomás de Mercado, a special envoy of the Holy Office, was dispatched to New Spain. A meticulous man, educated in the finest colleges of Salamanca, he possessed knowledge of medicine, chemistry, and anatomy, making him the perfect investigator to unravel mysteries that seemed supernatural. During his first weeks in Mexico, Mercado visited several sites where the incorrupt saints had appeared. What he discovered unsettled him deeply. All of the bodies showed microscopic signs of having been treated with unknown preserving substances. Beneath the seemingly intact skin, he detected small surgical incisions made with a precision thought impossible for the time. Even more disturbing was the geographic pattern he uncovered. When Mercado mapped the locations of all the discoveries, he realized they formed a perfect circle around San Miguel de Allende, with a radius of exactly 200 miles. At the very center of this circle lay the Mendoza estate. Determined to investigate further, Mercado infiltrated the community of San Miguel, posing as a humble Franciscan friar interested in documenting the local miracles. The Mendozas welcomed him with their usual generous hospitality, inviting him to dine at their estate and granting him full access to their sacred art workshop. But during this first visit, Mercado noticed details that alarmed him. The Mendozas possessed surgical instruments of extraordinary precision, allegedly for restoring sculptures, yet they seemed more suited to human dissection. In a locked room, he detected the same strange aroma others had described, that mixture of incense, herbs, and the sickly sweet scent of death that emanated from all the miraculous saints. But what disturbed him most was the conversation at dinner. The Mendozas spoke about the incorrupt saints with an intimacy that was unsettling, describing details of the bodies that only official ecclesiastical investigators should have known. When Mercado casually mentioned his interest in studying preservation techniques, Don Sebastian exchanged a significant glance with his sons, and the conversation abruptly changed to another topic. That night, as Mercado slept in the guest room of the estate, he was awakened by strange noises rising from the cellars. Rhythmic pounding, as if someone were working with wood or stone, mixed with murmurs that sounded like prayers, though in a language he could not identify. Peering discreetly through the window, he saw dim lights flickering from a subterranean structure he hadn't noticed during the day. Mercado resolved to intensify his investigation. Soon he discovered he was not alone in his suspicions. In the secret archives of the bishopric of Puebla, he found a letter written 6 months earlier by Father Rodrigo Vasquez, parish priest of a rural church near Toluca. The letter described Father Vasquez's doubts about the sudden appearance of an incorrupt saint in his church. He wrote that 3 days before the discovery, He had noticed strange nocturnal movements around the temple, hooded men carrying something heavy, and the following day he had found traces of wax and aromatic herbs belonging to no known ritual. The priest suspected that the body had been artificially placed in his church. His letter ended with a chilling line. "Father Bishop, I fear for my life. I have seen too much, and I know that they know I have seen. If something happens to me, remember, the truth lies in the crypt they built beneath the hermitage of San Antonio. May God protect me." Mercado immediately investigated Father Vasquez's fate. He learned that the priest had disappeared exactly 1 week after writing the letter. 40 days later, his incorrupt body was discovered in an abandoned chapel, declared the 29th saint in the miraculous series. Armed with this information, Mercado decided to confront the Mendozas directly, but with extreme caution. He arranged what seemed to be a casual meeting with Don Sebastian, during which he presented the maps he had drawn and asked for his opinion on the strange geographic pattern of the discoveries. The reaction of Don Sebastian was revealing. For an instant, his face transformed, showing a cold calculation that stripped away his usual mask of devotion. But he recovered quickly, smiling as he explained that surely this was divine will, that God had simply chosen that region to manifest his glory. That same night, Mercado was ambushed by 3 hooded men while returning to his lodging. He survived only thanks to the intervention of a group of muleteers who happened to pass by. The attackers fled, but Mercado noticed something chilling. One of them limped, exactly like Miguel Mendoza, Don Sebastian's eldest son. The next day, when Mercado tried to send an urgent message to Rome describing his findings, he discovered that all postal routes were under the control of the Mendozas or their associates. His letters never reached their destination. It became clear that the family had built a vast network of complicity that spread across the entire viceroyalty. The Mendozas knew they had been exposed. Mercado realized he had now become their next target. But before they could silence him, he made the most dangerous decision of his life: to infiltrate the Mendoza estate at night and uncover the truth about the underground crypt Father Vasquez had mentioned. On the night of August 23, 1658, taking advantage of the fact that the Mendozas had supposedly traveled to Mexico City for an important commission, Mercado slipped into the estate. He was accompanied by 2 trusted soldiers of the viceroy, whom he had secretly contacted. What they found in the property's underground chambers surpassed their worst fears. Beneath the main house stretched a vast subterranean complex of 5 levels, carved with the precision of a Gothic cathedral, yet designed for purposes far more macabre than sanctity. The first level functioned as a chemical laboratory, where the Mendozas perfected their preservation techniques. Marble tables were stained with dark substances, glass jars brimmed with liquids of impossible colors, and parchment scrolls lay covered in formulas written in a strange blend of Latin, Nahuatl, and symbols Mercado could not decipher. The sickly sweet stench of death was so strong they had to cover their noses with cloths soaked in holy water. The second level was a preparation workshop, containing the most sophisticated surgical instruments they had ever seen: obsidian scalpels with silver handles, golden needles thinner than a hair, and serrated saws designed specifically to cut human bone without damaging the surrounding tissue. Anatomical diagrams cover the walls, marking exact incision points for draining bodily fluids. But it was on the 3rd level that the full truth of the Mendoza business was revealed. It was a circular chamber with niches carved into the walls. In each niche lay a body at different stages of Sanctification. Mercado and the soldiers immediately recognized some of the victims: prosperous merchants who had vanished on their journeys, nuns famed for mystical visions, hermits known for extreme penance. The Mendozas had perfected a diabolical system. They carefully selected individuals celebrated for their devotion, kidnapped them during their solitary travels, and killed them using methods that left no visible marks. Then they applied their preservation techniques, a sinister fusion of ancestral Aztec knowledge, European alchemy, and stolen anatomical studies from the most prestigious universities. Once the bodies reached the perfect state of incorruption, the Mendozas secretly transported them to remote churches, planting them in positions of prayer, and spraying them with chemical perfumes that mimicked the supernatural scent of roses. Then they waited exactly 40 days before discovering the new saints, ensuring they were the first to offer their services for official veneration. But the horror deepened on the 4th level. Here they found a complete library of parchments, where every murder, every preservation technique, and every economic profit was meticulously documented. The Mendozas kept detailed records of the fortune generated by each false saint, donations received, commissions for reliquaries, payments for ceremonial transfers, and even percentages of the alms collected at pilgrimage sites. The documents revealed that, over 16 years of operation, the family had murdered 43 innocent people, amassing a fortune equivalent to the total silver reserves of 3 major mines. Their corruption extended far beyond local officials. Several bishops, and even members of the viceregal council, were complicit in the network of false saints, rewarded with shares of the profits. On the 5th and final level, Mercado and the soldiers found the crypt Father Vasquez had mentioned in his final letter. It was a circular chamber with a vaulted dome, where the Mendozas stored the bodies of all those who had tried to expose them. There lay Father Vasquez himself, Maria Chicotencatl, 3 merchants who had asked too many questions, and a dozen other victims who had uncovered fragments of the truth. But what turned the discovery into a nightmare was the condition of these bodies. Many were preserved using Mendoza techniques, still bearing the appearance of life that defied natural law. In the torchlight, their half-open mouths and eyes seemed to shimmer, as if they still struggled to speak, as if a fragment of consciousness remained trapped inside them. That very night, the Mendozas unexpectedly returned from their supposed trip to Mexico City. They found Mercado and the soldiers documenting evidence in the crypt. What followed was later described by chroniclers as the final judgment of the false saints. Don Sebastian Mendoza showed not a trace of remorse when confronted with the evidence of his crimes. With chilling calm, he declared that they had transformed faith into the most prosperous business of the New World. "People need saints and miracles," he explained, "and we simply supplied that demand with methods far more efficient than waiting for divine intervention." His sons attempted to flee through secret tunnels that connected to mountain caves, but they were captured by the viceroy's soldiers, whom Mercado had wisely alerted beforehand. During later interrogations, they revealed that the entire operation had begun when Don Sebastian stumbled upon ancient Aztec texts describing sacred mummification techniques. He decided to adapt them to create a business based on the manufacture of miracles. The trial of the Mendoza family became the greatest scandal of colonial Mexican history. The Inquisition acted with unusual speed, seeking to minimize the damage to popular faith, but the revelations were devastating. 43 saints were officially decanonized. Their relics were withdrawn from circulation, and the churches where they had been venerated were temporarily closed for purification. The 4 members of the Mendoza family were publicly executed on October 15, 1689, exactly 47 years after the first so-called miracle of Fray Antonio. But their punishment did not end with death. By express order of the viceroy, their bodies were dismembered and cremated, their ashes scattered in different places, so that they could never become objects of morbid veneration. The Mendoza estate was completely demolished, and in its place a chapel was built, dedicated to the expiation of sins committed against the faith. The underground tunnels, however, were sealed with blessed stones and mortar mixed with consecrated salt, because the soldiers who carried out the sealing swore they had heard laments from the depths, sounds that belonged neither to wine nor animals. The case files were sent directly to Rome, where they remain in the Vatican's most secret archives. Officially, the story of the false saints never existed. Families who had unknowingly venerated the Mendoza victims were granted special indulgences to purify their faith. But in San Miguel de Allende, a permanent scar remained. The church built over the old Mendoza estate was eventually closed for good, after parishioners attending its first masses swore they heard choruses of voices singing prayers in unknown tongues from beneath the main altar. The documents uncovered by Mercado revealed that the Mendozas had planned to expand their operation throughout the Spanish Empire, establishing saint factories in Peru, the Philippines, even in Spain itself. The papal intervention had prevented the falsification of holiness from becoming a global industry that might have corrupted the very foundations of the Catholic faith. This story shows us how human ambition can pervert even the most sacred impulses, transforming the search for the divine into a macabre commercial enterprise. The Mendozas understood that popular faith craved tangible manifestations of the supernatural, and they exploited that need with a coldness that continues to disturb anyone who studies this case. It forces us to ask unsettling questions. How many of the saints we have venerated throughout history were truly authentic? What other secrets still remain hidden in the deepest archives of the Vatican? The macabre story of the Mendoza family reminds us that even in the most sacred places, the darkest depths of human nature may dwell. If this story has unsettled you as much as it did us, share it with someone who loves history's darkest mysteries. Give it a like to support our work, and don't forget to subscribe, because we hold secrets that no other channel dares to reveal. We'll see you in the next video, where together we'll uncover another mystery that the authorities have tried to keep hidden for centuries.